I actually found a proper chair for this Q&A in my basement. It came with the house, and it's covered in dust and cobwebs, but I think it'll do just fine. Welcome to Q&A with your host, a guy who bought a 150-year-old house and is trying to fix it. So we're going to start out with, well, it's not a question, but a suggestion. One strategy you might consider would be a short 15-second stinger that rolls after your first spoken segment. Something like, if you're new here, my name's Chris Hytha. I'm an artist and designer based in the beautiful city of Philadelphia. I've been here for about a decade, and it's always been a dream to renovate my own house. I graduated from architecture school in 2021, so I have some of the skill sets required, but I'm also having to learn a lot along the way. My dream came true a few months ago when my offer was accepted on this house. There it is. And since then, we've been doing a lot of little work here and there, like removing carpets to start out and removing a lot of plaster to see the state that this house is in, and spoiler alert, it's not great. I'm documenting the progress of the renovation each week, so if you're interested in seeing how it all turns out, definitely subscribe, and hey, leave a like if you want to support the project. There are a ton of these home renovation DIY YouTube channels, but I really want to differentiate this channel by being more on the design and architecture side because that's my skill set. So throughout the project, I've integrated a lot of 3D modeling and visualizations to try to better tell the story of this house and communicate what I want to do with it. Welcome to the Q&A. We're here in my beautiful Philadelphia row home, and we really got this great kind of indoor-outdoor concept going where it's 30 degrees outside and it's also 30 degrees inside. Pretty cool. So we started with a suggestion, but here's a proper question. What's your plan for fixing the building envelope? Interestingly, this house had no insulation at all. Back in the day, they didn't really use insulation because they didn't have air conditioning, and I guess the fires kept them warm. And luckily no one put in insulation later on, because oftentimes that can lead to rotting out the wood because these walls were designed to breathe. For a while it was kind of tricky to deal with the envelope because I wanted to keep the old wooden walls, but I finally came to my senses and decided to just entirely demolish this old wooden section. I'm looking at it here. And because I'm just rebuilding it, it can be brought up to modern standards. So it'll be a typical 2x6 wall that can fit R21 batt insulation. It'll be a lot better than having no insulation. Other than that, there's also a lot of brick walls, and some of them, like this wall behind me, is shared with the neighboring house, so that doesn't need insulation. And surprisingly, the sound insulation is pretty great. I've lived in row homes for a long time and never really had an issue. But the front walls are also brick. It's stucco, then a double width of brick, and then plaster. And I'm tempted to just leave it that way. Sometimes people will just build out a 2x4 wall to get insulation, but then you lose the old historic trim that could date back to like 1850. So I kind of want to keep those, and I can live with the front walls being a little bit cold. Moko Wan 6642 says, do you have a time frame in mind for getting the house finished and moving in? Well, the time frame is always changing. I think now that the permits are nearly done, I'm going to actually put together a schedule and get an idea for how long each of the different trades is going to take and when I could move in. Right now, I'm hoping to just move in by like late spring, summer. I'm not in a huge rush. I'm living in an apartment in the city, and it does suck to double up on paying rent and also the mortgage for this house. For now, I can make it work, and it's nice to not be in too much of a rush. When I first bought the place, I thought I might move in like a couple months. I thought I was going to do some small stuff here and there, but yeah, the project's grown a lot, and the damage we uncovered kind of required some more major work that in the long run is going to be great. Like once this project's finished, I think it's going to be a wonderful home. So all the work will be worthwhile. Another question here. I'd love to know if you have any tiny details that are a must for your new house. In that comment, he mentioned using fancy dimmer switches. I'm kind of interested in exploring the idea of having the old school push button switches. That could be cool, but I'm not set on it. I think the one thing I am kind of set on is using the historic wood doors and ideally stripping off the paint. They're, right here behind me is one of them, these old panel doors, and over there's a couple. But the main bedroom doors in the house have been replaced with the awful hollow core doors. And I want to, I'll probably have to thrift some of the old doors, and I'm gonna have to learn how to hang a door. I'm kind of intimidated about that. It seems like it might be a hard process. And also just stripping the paint from these old doors is going to be a challenge. So that's something I think it's really important, like to spend money, care, and effort and thought on the things you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Doors, you're going in and out of all the time. So the door plus the hardware. I would love to pay respect to this old home by adding back some of these solid core doors. Not a question, but a request. Please show us all 100 house thumbnails. So I've talked about it through the whole series, but I did a photo series on Philadelphia row homes that is really part of why I decided to buy a house. I already loved them before doing the photo project, but after that, I've just always looked at them with admiration, and I love the history and how these houses have changed over time. And to be a part of one of these houses that we're in now is really an incredible experience. So very quickly, here's all 100. And you can also go to my website to explore these and spend more than like a millionth of a second on each one of them. And you can also buy a print if you want to support the project. And I include an old historic nail that I pulled out of the lath and plaster from the house, and I'll ship it to you. And full disclosure, it might be so brittle that it just breaks if you try to use it to hang the print, but give it a shot. I think it's cool to hang the print with the nail from the house, And for those of you who have bought prints, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. Another question, do you have plans to update the fence? So the backyard is just kind of a chain link fence and a concrete slab. It's nothing to write home about, but there's not a lot of things in this house that are good enough to save, and the fence is kind of on that line where it's fine, it does its job, it creates a little bit of privacy. And I think if I go through with my plan of making like a garden out there and planting some taller bushes and letting ivy grow across the fence, I think that these fences can work. I think it could be really great. And the backyard was entirely full of ivy when I bought it. I had to clear it out, and a lot of people were like, no, you should have kept the ivy. It'll grow back. I just needed to clear it out so I could put a bunch of bricks back there, So, long story short, if I have some extra money at some point, maybe I'll replace it with a wooden fence, but not a priority. I got a lot of other stuff to do here. A question from Nicole. What non-computer drafting tools do you use? I'd love to know if you have a particular paper, pencil, ruler, etc. I love sketching. I love this question. My design process always starts on paper. You can get ideas out quicker and experiment, and it's wonderful. I've filled up many, many, many sketchbooks over the years, and drawing is kind of what got me into architecture. Right here is my collection of finished sketchbooks that go back all the way from high school all the way to like the past few years. So I want to show you some of the contents of these books while I talk about some of the supplies I use. This is a sketchbook from 2021 that we'll look through. For sketches like this, I love using micron pens. These come in a variety of different thicknesses and line weights. So like the foliage is a light pen, and then the outline is a darker pen. And then on top of that, I love adding value with these Copic markers. I've also used Prismacolor. I also love doing these abstract, like geometric sketches. My sketchbooks are full of these, and they're just kind of like a relaxing way to like turn off your brain and just draw shapes. There's also a lot of less refined sketches in here. I've never been good at drawing people, so sometimes I just sit at a park and draw everyone I see. Sometimes my sketches are more for planning, like this was kind of compositional planning for photo ideas, and I use some colored pencils for that. And mixed in with the nice sketches, there's a bunch of pages of just brainstorming ideas for products, more design stuff. I love integrating in a red pen. Also, you can see I have trace paper taped in. I like adding some depth in my sketchbooks with like layers of trace and everything like that. Here's another one of the many like conceptual architecture, just like fantasy pieces. These are really fun to do because you never know how they're going to turn out. You just kind of start with one thing and turn your brain off, and it just grows into something you never expected. I always love strong contrast, so for the black, I was just using a Sharpie to fill in like the silhouette in the background to give the sketch some depth. And again, I'm using the Copic markers for the shadows and the kind of grayscale texture here. Moving on to my current sketchbook, as always, I have some conceptual building designs, a floor plan and an elevation of the top. Whenever I travel, I try to do a quick sketch on a plane, so I have
so many sketches that look just like this of the fuselage of a plane. In this sketchbook, more recently, I started experimenting with graphite sketches. This is inspired by Hugh Ferris, incredible illustrator in like the 1920s. He was also an architect that was just influential in the Art Deco movement. So I'm trying to learn from him by kind of copying a lot of his style here. Here's another great example of that. He often does this thing where there's dark silhouettes, like these trees and cars and people, that have a strong contrast because the base of the building is illuminated with these kind of spotlights. Here's another one of these airplane sketches. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of bleed through from another sketch here. Again, these are always so fun and a great way to start my travels. Oftentimes, I like to try to sketch every day when I'm traveling, and this was a trip to Buenos Aires earlier this year. So I have a sketch every day, and it's a great way to remember the trip and kind of catalog things that were interesting to me. And for these sketches, I was using a hybrid of the Micron pens plus using the pencil set for shading rather than using these Copic markers for shading like I did before. I think it's always important to experiment with mediums and techniques and always trying new things to keep developing your sketching. I always love a mix of architectural stuff and also this kind of other style. I don't know what you would call it, but it's just kind of a creative challenge. And there's a few different pieces in here that are a little bit more conceptual, like this one or this one. I don't know what it is. It's like a brain made of leaves with eyes. I don't know. Sometimes I put pencil to paper and it turns out to be something weird. I'll leave you with that. So I have so many more sketchbooks. If you're interested in seeing some more of my sketching work, let me know. I'd love to share it. But I hope seeing some of these drawing supplies could be helpful. And if you're interested in architecture or design at all, I highly encourage that you do some sketching. It's a great skill to have, and I'm going to be sketching all my life. So
Luke Johnson asked a question. He said, my question for the Q&A is what seemed like it would be the easiest / hardest before you started and what actually was. I'm still in the early phases of this renovation, so I don't have too much insight on what's going to be the easiest / hardest. But so far what I can say is the house buying process was a lot easier than I thought. And the permitting process, I knew it was going to be hard, but it's been longer than I expected. Mostly my fault because I am indecisive and I kept changing my plans and resubmitting. I mean, I expected it to be grueling and it's been grueling. The house buying process though, I was worried about getting a mortgage because I'm an independent artist. I don't really have a consistent income. I don't have like a W-2. So I wasn't sure what I would qualify for. But surprisingly, like when you're buying a house, everyone is working on commission and everyone is working quickly. Like it was amazing how quickly my realtor would get back to me or the lender would answer my questions or the insurance guy. Like every piece of that process, people were really helpful and really responsive. And to contrast that with the city and permitting, it's night and day. Because for permitting, it's hard to get questions answered and you pay $1,600 for a fast review. And my most recent permit review, they just asked for a letter and then they didn't look at the letter for 7 days because, you know, the holidays and because they didn't have to. It seems like they just wait as long as they possibly can before they send you a review. Like, it's just a letter. It's like 200 words. Read it, you know, get back to me. But I digress. Back to the questions. Captain McFartin asked a question. They said, what are your plans for networking, CCTV, cable, satellite infrastructure? It's really intimidating with a house with all the things you can do to it. And there's like people telling me things left and right of like, you have to do this with your water system or make sure you install the Cat6 cables or, you know, wire it up with Ethernet. There's so many things to think about and I haven't thought a lot about this. My brother's in kind of tech and hardware engineering, so he's big on convincing me to get the Cat6 cables, whether it's for cameras or smart home equipment. So I'll do it. It'll be kind of an afterthought once it's all framed up. I'll look into it then, make some decisions, run some cable, and hopefully make the right choices. But if you have any suggestions, send them my way. But it's nice to hear suggestions and hopefully they come back to me when I'm at that phase of the project. Those were my selections of YouTube comments. I also got a handful of comments through Instagram, and I want to answer those questions as well. If you're not following me on Instagram, I share some more of the house, I don't know, some behind the scenes, and also my artwork. So follow me over there if you want to see a little bit more of what's going on here. So a few questions to answer here from Instagram. How did you determine where to begin? Well, I think it's pretty straightforward generally. In the sequence of construction, you know what needs to happen. And the first step is design. I think even when I first saw the place, I had ideas of what I wanted to change, what I wanted to do. That's really step number one. And then permits, and then find the team to do it. And, it's really intimidating, probably mainly because of the finances and because of the unknown problems that can be really, really expensive. But the process is generally simple. And for me to find good partners like Axe Builders that have a lot of experience with this type of stuff to answer the questions I might have on timeline or where to start has been really helpful. So I'd recommend, if you're doing something like this, just be a sponge, ask a lot of questions, find people who know what they're doing, and take advantage of their expertise. I'd love to know about how YouTube finances / success play into the cost of reno. This has been something really fascinating that I've been thinking a lot about, because I didn't do any, spreadsheets and calculations and numbers and cost analysis when I bought this house. It was very much a feeling thing. I liked the location and I thought it had a lot of potential, and it was like the cheapest thing in Philly, or at least in the areas that I was looking. I realized later that no one was buying this. It was on the market for like 150 days, probably for a reason, because they realized there's termite damage and the floors are sagging and the wall has to get rebuilt and all of this stuff that I looked past. So if I was like a flipper, a real estate developer, I'd be down bad and I'll be lucky to break even on this house. But when you factor in the YouTube revenue, it totally changes the equation of what's possible. And then also factoring in the value for me as someone who went to architecture school and loves buildings and these old houses, to learn about them, and learn this whole process of construction and renovation. And then also to know my own house inside and out. I'm gonna live here for, hopefully the next decade, and to know where every run of HVAC is and where the plumbing is and how everything works is very valuable. And all of this value I'm talking about doesn't apply to like a flipper. So the equation's very different, and I'm super thankful to you guys for watching this series and helping finance it in a really meaningful way. So thank you. And I have dreams, like if this series can grow, all the money is going to be reinvested into the house, and I'll be able to just go crazier with finishes and features and design. It'll work as it is, but I might need to, just get my kitchen from IKEA instead of hiring someone to build the cabinets, and that's fine. But hey, if you like, subscribe, share it with a friend. If we can blow this up, this will be such a cool house. So that's just a long-term dream. And included in that is like the facade. If I could raise like $50,000, I would tear the entire front of the house off and rebuild it in a beautiful, classically sensitive way with an ornate cornice, and like, it'll be cool. So I have a lot of long-term plans. Have you had to make design sacrifices that you didn't want to make? This has been one of the most conflicting things with this house. Usually working in architecture for a client, you can blame the client for, not appreciating your designs and not doing it, and you have a scapegoat. But here, I'm the client and I'm the designer and I'm the financer. So it's like, I have these great design ideas, and then the other side of my brain is saying, no, you can't afford that. Like, doing this addition is already blowing the budget way past what I wanted to do. I put a big bay window for the bedroom up there. I want a lot of light. I want a place for plants. And then I'm looking on Home Depot, and the bay windows are like $7,000, $8,000. And then you have to deal with building a little roof over the bay. And then you have to coordinate with structural and all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'll just put 2 double hung windows together and it'll be good enough. There have been many areas that I've had to compromise, but the one feature that I have conviction in and that I'm doing, not to a huge extra direct cost, but more to a functional cost, is the light well. So up above the stairs is going to be open, the ceiling up on the 3rd floor is going to be lofted, and there's going to be 2 skylights that will wash the whole staircase in light. 2 big downsides: 1, square footage. That could have been a big closet on the 3rd floor that a developer would have done. They would have just taken the square footage. And 2, with thermal performance, the 3rd floor is going to get really hot because all the cold air sinks down. So having a big hole in your floor isn't great for HVAC. Another question: did you have construction experience before your GC license? I do have a lot of construction experience. I worked on an official job site for one summer, just installing like doorknobs Wasn't great direct experience, but just working on a job was good. But more than that, my dad does construction. So growing up, I would always help him with things. I wish I helped him more to gain some more skills, but I've been surrounded with it for a long time. And more recently, I've been working with a general contractor here in the city, doing a lot of miscellaneous projects like parging a basement or framing a wall here and there. So I've definitely picked up some experience. But interestingly, here in Philadelphia, the GC license, you're not required to have any certified construction experience or anything. Honestly, it's more about having insurance and being properly documented with the city, so the city knows who to talk to if something goes wrong or if something's not to code. It's really just a more bureaucratic certification to get that just required getting an OSHA 30 certification, getting the insurance, and a couple miscellaneous other things to be able to GC this house myself. And I'm really happy that I made that decision. So that's it. That's the Q&A. I hope you got some insight out of this. If you do have another question that I didn't address, leave it in the comments. I'll respond. And in general, I'm just happy to bring you guys along with this process. It's always cool in the comments when I see other people that are either thinking about doing a similar thing, buying a fixer-upper, that want to know a little bit more about the process and get value from seeing how I'm approaching the project, or people that are on the other side and have already finished a renovation, and seeing me go about this just reminds them of when they were deep in it like I am. I also want to address a topic from last week's video, which got a crazy response. I was expecting more comments about the Q&A, but everyone on the last video was talking about the thumbnails. And it's really cool to see that everyone seemed really interested in me keeping the art thumbnails, the Rowhome images. And I'm really glad you guys like them. But a couple people also mentioned the idea that, of course, the people watching now like the thumbnails, and the people who don't like the thumbnails aren't here to comment about it. This is a really interesting analogy to survivor bias or survivorship bias. I heard this story somewhere, forget where, might get the details wrong. There were planes coming back to the airfields in World War II. They would have holes in them, a bunch of bullet holes, and the engineers would reinforce the planes where all the bullets were hitting, add more sheet metal there. But they realized that that approach was entirely wrong. It was the areas where the planes didn't have holes, like, near fuel tanks and engines, that were actually the places you need to reinforce, because the planes that got hit there never came back to be seen. So in this case, the analogy is, I guess, the people who stopped watching the series are the planes, metaphorically, in the World War that crash. Again, the analogy isn't perfect. Long story short, I want to take a couple people's suggestions of doing a little A and B testing, which is a feature that YouTube offers. So for the next video, I'm going to do a typical thumbnail of the house, and I'm also going to try to make a unique one that's related to the content. And I kind of like the challenge of creating a photo every week to represent what's happening. And I think compared to other YouTubers, I have a leg up because I'm a photographer and digital artist. I have a lot of Photoshop skills, so I think I'll be able to come up with some creative concepts, and we'll see. So next week, let me know if you got the normal thumbnail of the house, or if you got something new that might be my face in a pile of bricks or something. We'll see. So with that, let's wrap it up. I'll be back next week. We're almost moving forward. Still a couple of weeks. I'm gonna have an initial inspection, but the permits are like done. I can't wait to demolish it all, build it back. Yeah, I've waited long enough, and I'm freezing in here and my hands are cold. So thanks for watching.